Many extraordinary things simply go unnoticed. Nuances of their oddities get lost on paper. The Blackwood Society's legacy has been spent cataloging strange anomalies, though it's often difficult to pinpoint their exact destructiveness, as resulting casualties tend to be masked behind mundane explanations and accepted truths. What doesn't fit a convenient box is cast aside as inconsequential, imagined, or conspiratorial. But that doesn't mean those things don't exist. They still linger in the shadows of civilization, not constrained by space or time, thriving in disregard to what we've built. Their greatest ally, our disbelief. The following case falls under the category of hidden in plain sight, so we ask the viewers to remain vigilant of the uninvited. Through extensive research, Agent Lemon has put together a docket of police and hospital reports from Greenwich, Connecticut. On the surface, they paint a picture of a troubled household on Maple Lane, constantly interacting with law officers in emergency rooms, though, if you dig a bit, inexplicable patterns begin unearthing. The Wilsons are your run-of-the-mill suburban family, 2 children, a white picket fence, an affable couple charismatically leading the household. It wasn't until November of 2014 that the Greenwich Police Department began amassing late-night disturbance complaints, reports of strange behavior, and domestic concerns. In tandem, most of these incidents were connected to ER visits for stitches or casts, so it looks pretty bad. When Agent Lemon approached the family, they seemed instantly responsive to his authority and welcomed anyone claiming they could help. Inviting the agent in for coffee, they discussed their own take on the recent happenings, acknowledging that admittedly, from an outside perspective, it may look like a dysfunctional household, but assured the agent they had a normal life until a month ago. The mother, Nancy Wilson, went on to recall attending a wedding, leaving teenage Amber home alone to house sit. When they returned, the warm, cozy feeling of their surroundings had been drained. They felt like strangers in their own home. It wasn't until Richard Wilson, a long-haul trucker, left for his week-long shift that inexplicable bad luck befell the family. Flat tires, malfunctioning credit cards, late clocks, repeating flus, lost wallets, and even a skunk attack. Assailed by Murphy's Law, anything that could go wrong did go wrong for the family. Additionally, more paranormal things began occurring as well. Objects would shift around the house, switching places with other objects when not observed. Doors would sometimes jam while other times refused to stay shut. Lights inexplicably flickered throughout the day, and worst of all, Susie, the youngest of the household, began experiencing night terrors. She would frequently sleepwalk into the dining room and stand in front of the sliding rear doors outlooking the backyard, which itself neighbored a national forest preserve. If no one was around to notice her, she'd stand there swaying until midnight before waking in an ear-splitting yell of terror. It was during Agent Lemon's line of questioning that Amber hesitantly admitted to hosting guests while house-sitting the weekend of the wedding. It wasn't a party, she'd claimed, just a small group of friends from one of her classes. Amber went on to say that a couple of them showed up with the strange girl of the school. Supposedly her name was Christine. No one really talked to her or ever seen her family. She'd always wear black and slather her face in matching makeup. Sometimes the girl would draw symbols and shapes all over her skin with marker. Amber was surprised to see her there, but figured against being rude and saying something. It wasn't until recently she recalled losing track of Christine for about an hour or so, and couldn't help shaking the feeling she had something to do with everything going on. As Amber started to ramble, a sliver of bright red peeking out from beneath the carpet caught Lemon's eye. He stood from the table and pulled back the rug to reveal a large pentagram painted on the wooden parapet. At each of the 5 points were foreign symbols scratched into the floor. Symbols Amber quickly recognized as the ones doodled over the strange girl's skin. It was then Lemon excused himself and phoned in with escalation. The following is transcribed from Agent Lemon's debriefing interview. Quote, "It wasn't even 15 minutes when we heard the knock on the door. I knew HQ worked fast, but I thought securing a professional would take a lot longer. I digress. There in the entryway stood two women of strikingly similar appearance. They smiled casually and introduced themselves as the Cersei sisters, offering a limp handshake and an extravagant business card. Marvelous mediumship and psychic cleansing, it read. Though unimposing in their demeanor, the air around them felt strange, as if charged with energy. Like an actor or musician with a strong personality, one would feel invigorated just being in their presence. Peculiarly, when I'd look at one of the sisters while the other one was in view, the latter's face would become blurry, as if my attention could only focus on one of them individually. I could tell by the darting eyes of the others they probably were experiencing the same phenomenon. Regardless, we welcomed the two inside, and just as the door was closing, from between our legs darted a black cat into the house. We tried to catch it, assuming it was a stray, but the Cersei sisters simply smiled and said, "He's with us." Before anyone had time to pose a question or voice a concern, the cat ran into Amber's room, pouncing around from bookshelf to bookshelf, knocking knickknacks and books to the floor, making a mess of things. Short-tempered, Amber flew into a rage and caught the cat by the scruff, tossing him out of her room, though her anger dissipated quickly after seeing what the animal uncovered. Lodged between pages of books, stuffed behind picture frames, and jammed into dusty corners were various occult-looking objects. Multiple crystals, bundles of herbs, dried sticks, dried bones, and even various tarot cards. The Wilsons were devoted Christians and swore that such objects had no place in their home. Amber's reaction was one of shock and fear, so I was inclined to believe these things were not placed by anyone in the family. And as we all stood speechless trying to process the meaning of these items, our attention once more was diverted by that cat. He was furiously scratching at a bent floorboard in the hallway closet. Following a hunch, I pried the loose board up, and under the floor sat an aged human skull, surrounded by dwindling tea lights. The Cersei sisters wasted no time. At the sight of the skull, they quickly directed everyone towards the dining room table. We all situated ourselves as the two mediums began setting up an elaborate display before us. They lit candles, scattered around stones, feathers, mushrooms, burned incense, and finally placed a Ouija board down to complete the bastardized centerpiece. While my description of the events likely sounds theatrical, it in no way felt like that. There was a heavy feeling present. The night was solemn. And as we sat watching the two mediums hover their hands over the burning wicks of their candles, a trance-like silence fell over the group. Their magnetism was spinning our collective energy for their purpose. The two sisters gently placed their fingertips over the planchette, and almost instantly it began to move, spiraling across the board in a figure eight. The ease at which the two produced results was astounding. The answers they got back were horrifying. End quote. Below is a list of questions posed to the Ouija board and their respective answers. Is there someone here with us? Yes. Do you have good or bad intentions? Neither. What is your name? No answer. Are you responsible for the bad luck? No. Do you know who is? Yes. Who? No answer. What is your name? No answer. What do you want? Death. After the session concluded, the family naturally was scared, but the two mediums assured everything will be okay. The next day, they'd gather all the objects found, cleanse them and the house, and everything will be back to normal. As the group was wrapping up, the mediums suggested allowing their cat to stay the night. Seeing as he was an indispensable help earlier in the day, the family roused no objection. What's his name? Was the only concern voiced. He doesn't have one, answered one of the sisters. But you could call him Whiskers, finished the other. The following day, everyone once again converged at the Wilsons' residence. They were greeted by a concerned Nancy thanking the sisters profusely for leaving the cat. It seemed that little Susie had once again walked up to the sliding door at the rear of the house while fast asleep, though this time the door was inexplicably open. If not for the cat, Susie may have walked right into those woods. When asked for her perspective, Susie's description of the events goes as followed, quote, I dreamt I was walking down a long, winding road. It hung in the air, bobbed and dipped like a roller coaster. On each side of the path were big bottomless drops. There were no sounds around, no smells, nothing really. But I wasn't scared. I knew I had somewhere to go. I knew I had somewhere to be, so I walked forward. I kept walking until Whiskers jumped on me. He woke me up inches from the sliding door to the backyard. It was early in the morning, and there in the trees of the forest behind our house, 2 women dressed in white stood watching me. They were angry for some reason, but I knew better than to go out there. I knew better than to talk to strangers." End quote. Again, the Cersei sisters wasted no time, hastily loading the fire pit outside with kindling and igniting it. Then the 2 gathered all the items around the house and began tossing them into the fire one by one. They'd bow their heads and whisper strange words. Then one would toss an object into the flames while the other one took swigs of spirit straight from the bottle, spitting it over the pit, combusting it into a fireball. The sight was strange to behold, and to Christians like the Wilsons, it probably felt taboo. Yet undeniably, with each object incinerated, Agent Lemon remarked that the oppressive air blanketing the residence relaxed. It was towards the end of the ritual that a rustle from the tree line caught everyone's attention. There in the tall grass stood what was later identified as a jackal. It was motionless, intently staring at the Cersei sisters with a glimmer of intelligence behind its eyes. And while perhaps it was the group's imagination projecting onto the animal, everyone claimed it didn't appear happy with what the group was doing. The following is an excerpt from Amber Wilson's interview. Quote, "We stood there shocked by the thing. There's coyotes in Connecticut, but not jackals. And it didn't seem scared of us either. It just stood there watching like somebody's pet. It wasn't until Whiskers came outside and hissed that the thing's ears perked up. The 2 met each other's eyes, and the cat actually started to chase it into the woods. Naturally, I was worried about the little guy, so I ran after it but was too scared to enter the forest. And as I stood there at the edge of the backyard calling for it, in the shadows of the trees I could have sworn I saw a shape of a much larger animal, a panther, a jaguar, something. And its eyes were emerald green, just like Whiskers." End quote. By the time the Cersei sisters completed the ritual, it was once again dark out. Getting rid of all those objects produced a noticeably different atmosphere. The air felt lighter. The family looked less tense, and they even started joking and laughing with each other. While that's all well and good, the sisters said that there's still more to be done. Once again, they suggested their cat stay the night and scheduled a visit for the following day. Though this time, as they all left the house, one of the sisters turned to Agent Lemon and in a hushed tone said, "There's a full moon out tonight." "A witching moon," clarified the other. "You should be careful," added the first. Agent Lemon had the foresight to bug the Wilsons' residence, surveilling the family from a van parked across the street. It was around midnight a mic went hot in Susie's room. The equipment picked up the audio of a strange scratching noise. It sounded like somebody running a fingernail down drywall. The noise sounded familiar. The agent couldn't recall exactly where he'd heard it before. He had no time to contemplate it because through the stillness of the night rang out an ungodly roar followed by Susie's pleas for help. Something snatched her. Whatever it was, wasn't human. The following is part of Agent Lemon's statement. Quote, "I burst into the house and made the mistake of running to check Susie's room. The instant I crossed the threshold, the door slammed behind me, jamming itself shut. Dread set in as I saw the girl was not in her bed and heard her wailing from the living room. I began to charge the door, slamming into it repeatedly in an attempt to dislodge the thing. Distant reverberations of Amber and Nancy screaming from their rooms mixed with the chaos of furniture being toppled over and monstrous growls. It was when the distinct sound of sliding doors violently wheeling open echoed throughout the residence that a shocked silence befell the house. Susie's calls for help stopped being pulled around, instead becoming sedentary. She was about to be dragged out of the house into the woods when all went silent. The creature that snatched her had stopped for some reason. The air was tense and through the walls bellowed an eldritch screech. It was met in response by the Cersei sisters' cat. The thing didn't like that. As the clash subsided, I finally managed to break the door off its hinges. Crashing into the hallway, I saw Susie running towards her mother's bedroom. The corridor she was in was unnaturally dark. Light was being swallowed by a thick, oily shroud of night. And out of that thick darkness jutted a hand, grabbing Susie by the hair, yanking her towards the anomalous blackness. I lifted myself up, the pain of my shoulders setting in through the adrenaline. I started to trudge onward, trying to help, but between us stepped one of the sisters, blocking me off. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a fistful of white powder. Speaking words in a language I've never heard before, she clapped her hands together, and the substance puffed into the air like dust. It lingered there for a moment before igniting into a blinding white flash of light that wiped the unearthly darkness away. And with it, vanished the mysterious hand. That's when Amber darted out of her room and snatched her sister Susie into her arms, retreating to safety. It wasn't until we budged open the door to Nancy's room that we saw Amber trapped inside with her and realized our mistake. We turned to confront the doppelganger, but it was too late. They were nowhere to be seen. Panic set over the house as we frantically searched for Susie. It was then through the kitchen window we saw them. Amidst the trees of the backyard stood a group of strange women. Most were nude, but the few that weren't had on odd costumes. Nancy ran outside and collapsed to her knees, stricken with sorrow. She wailed out at them, pleading for her daughter. "Give her back to me," she yelled, with an intense heartbreak cracking through her voice, the strain of the months leading to this day weighing down her words. The women just stared, emotionless, alien. And a moment later, weaving her way out from between the group, was Susie. No effort to stop her, snatch her back. Instead, they let Nancy spring forward and embrace the child, her tears of sorrow turning to tears of relief as she muttered the words "thank you" at them. Then they turned around and walked back into the woods once more. Nancy held her child, sobbing in catharsis. I walked over to console them, but offering a helping hand, she erupted into a rage at the sight of me. She barked to leave, pushing me towards the door. She blamed everything on us, on the sisters, on the society. I tried to take control of the situation, but she just grew more frantic, throwing things at us, threatening to call the police. So I did the only thing I could, and left. The Cersei sisters followed suit. I stood outside dumbfounded. The events of the night felt like a bad dream, foggy, impossible, over too quickly. I thought about returning to the Wilsons' house, but the sound of distant sirens made me think otherwise. I thought perhaps it was all over. The house did feel different. Susie was reunited with her mother, but now I see that was naive optimism. "You should keep an eye out on that place," one of the sisters said to me as they turned to leave. "Because that's not her daughter," added the second one. End quote.